My name is Lorenzo Raplili. I am from the country of Vanuatu in the Pacific Islands.
My name is Roni Simbaro. I am from the country of Fiji Islands in the Pacific Islands.
My name is Tanya Afu and I am from the country of Solomon Islands in the Pacific Islands.
My name is Rebecca and I am from the country of Kiribati in the Pacific Islands.
My name is Marie Juanita Melsebury and I come from the beautiful country of Vanuatu in the Pacific Islands.
My name is Belinda Rekimani and I am from the country of Solomon Islands in the Pacific Islands.
My name is Laveta Malaki Seru and I'm from Fiji in the Pacific Islands.
The people and the communities of the Blue Pacific are living in climate emergency, a crisis that sadly continues to be ignored by many countries, including those nearest to our islands.
The Pacific is leading a charge using our Pacific culture, tradition, and wisdom of ecological and social stewardship to bring us through the current global climate catastrophe.
We are committed to a climate-stable Pacific future that is unified, intersectional, and intergenerational.
In the lead up to COP26, we, the civil society of the Pacific Islands, demand climate justice and action now.
The Pacific demands that fossil fuels are fossils and you keep them in the ground to serve the Pacific.
No new coal, oil, or gas projects, and an immediate end to all fossil fuel subsidies everywhere.
The Pacific demands that you show real commitment and your NDCs must limit global heating to 1.5 degrees. We are already out of time in the Pacific.
Sustained, radical and socially just cuts to emissions are required now and not later.
The Pacific demands that you show us the money.
Mobilize all the promised 100 billion annually USD until 2025.
And agree that polluters must pay the trillions actually needed for resilient Pacific peoples and communities.
The Pacific witnesses that loss and damage is life and death.
Your political will is required now to finance and deliver support to the Pacific people who are already losing everything.
The Pacific declares that climate change is a symptom of deeper injustice and inequalities.
Gender justice and women's human rights and empowerment is a precondition for climate, social, economic, ecological, and climate justice.
The Pacific asserts that climate justice will prevail.
Your emissions are already responsible for the loss of universal human rights and environmental rights of Pacific people, communities, and ecosystems.
We will see you in courts of law and in all other forums to protect and retain our rights.
The Pacific demands that global climate negotiations on COP26 must be inclusive, intersectional, and intergenerational. Do not marginalize the voices of the Pacific Islands people at COP26.
Do not marginalize the voices of the Pacific Island peoples at COP26.
Do not marginalize the voices of Pacific Island peoples at COP26.
Do not marginalize the voices of the Pacific Island people at COP26.
Do not marginalize the voices of our Pacific peoples at COP26.
Do not marginalize the voices of Pacific Island peoples at COP26.
Do not marginalize.
Do not
marginalize
Do not marginalize the voices of our
Island
Pacific
people at
people
COP26.
at COP26.